Yeah. All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Lauren Herbine, and I am a third semester master's student in the Ecogeomorphology and Topographic Analysis Lab, working with Dr. Joe Wheaton. Today, I'm going to be bringing you through some intermediate progress that I have made towards river styling the entire Mississippi River Basin. I don't know if this is. We just changed the batteries. I can use the keyboard. Is it? Ah, there we go. Okay. So first I'm going to be walking you through what a riverscape is. Then we're going to be talking about some of the motivations behind this project. We'll walk through my roadmap to final project or products. And then because this is an intermediate progress update, I've just selected 3 pieces that I've been working on in the past year or so. And those are the channel area tool. We'll go over some segmentation. And then because you guys are here for the field pictures, we'll go through some field validation. So what is a riverscape? So traditionally, we think of rivers as just channels, the blue in this picture. However, we know now that there's a whole host of processes that go on in the floodplains and tributary fans, and all of that comprises a valley bottom that can flood regularly. So a riverscape is essentially just the part of a landscape that can flood in the contemporary flow regime. So like I said, we used to be just concerned with the blue lines on this map, but we're expanding our focus to include the green areas, which greatly increases the amount of landscape that we are looking at when we're talking about restoration, development, any sorts of things. So instinctually, we can look at these pictures, which are all part of the Mississippi River Basin, by the way, and recognize that they are different riverscapes. However, can we say why they're different riverscapes? And do we have the data to back that up? And can we do that in like a standardized way? Right now, we can't. And we're concerned, or we want to be able to do that so that we can ask questions like, how common are these different flavors? How many kilometers of them exist? Where can we find them? And we're concerned with this because we want to be more effective in managing these riverscapes, whether that's in a restoration context, in a development context, research, science communication. We want to be able to make predictions about riverscapes' form and processes. So form and process, you're like, Lauren, that's pretty vague. And you're right, it is. And to explain this, I will give you yet another set of 3 pictures that all of you will probably be able to tell me are different riverscapes. But again, we can say like, oh, this is in a mountain headwater, this is more out in the plains, but we don't actually know, and we can't say in a standardized way what is going on and what is different between these riverscapes. So we might give them names. We might say this is a steep headwater, this one's confined with occasional floodplain pockets. But what I am wanting to get us to is these expectations about behavior. We want to be able to say in an empirical way what we can expect at these different riverscapes. So for example, at a steep headwater, get ready for some jargon, we want to be able to say there's supply limited in-stream geomorphic units. We want to say there's infrequent floodplains with vertical accretion as the primary building process. And we want to be able to provide this for large scales. So to do this, I'm testing it out in a little watershed called the Mississippi River Basin. It's not actually that small. It's the 2nd largest watershed in the world. It drains 32 states and parts of Canada. And the cool thing is that we actually have a lot of data in this basin. The USGS has the National Hydrography Dataset, or NHD, and we have our nationwide digital elevation models, 10 meters. The EPA has ecoregions. So we have a lot of data, but right now we don't have any way that is cost-effective, efficient, replicable to use that data at this scale to tell us things about our riverscapes. So that's my goal. This will be useful to a lot of people, but especially to folks like the NRCS. I'm giving them a shout out mostly because they're funding this project. But they're a great example of who might be using this product because they are tasked with managing and protecting large swaths of the Mississippi River Basin because it is largely agricultural. So this is a very broad overview of how I'm going to be getting to this goal. So basically, I'm going to be beefing up the geomorphic network attribute tool. I'm going to be inputting relevant metrics about riverscapes from that nationally available data that will help me discern between different river styles. From there, I'll be able to extract a database, apply some rule tables to river style all of those reaches. And then the output of that is going to be consumable curated projects that anybody with web access can consume. So a couple of these intermediate steps are going to be more for Power GIS users. So researchers, some of you in the room are probably going to be interested in some of these. But this last product, the projects, those will be web users, stakeholders, practitioners, educators. Again, anybody with web access will be able to use those final products. So that was a broad overview, and obviously there's a lot more going on in the background, and I don't expect you to take in all of this slide, but this is just to show you kind of more in detail what I've been working on these past 3 semesters. And some of this I've already accomplished. A lot of this I'm still working on, and about 1/3 of it I have yet to get to. And so, like I said in the beginning, I'm just going to take out 3 of these different pieces and walk you through those right now. So we're going to start with the channel area tool. So that National Hydrography dataset, when you open it up, it gives you a bunch of polylines that represent the river network. But like we said in the beginning, river networks are not just polylines. And this is especially important when you are trying to measure things about rivers. If you want to know something as simple as a bankful width, you can't get that from a polyline. For example, in northern Wisconsin, we have lakes that are part of our riverscape network, and they are represented by a line here. Something a little bit more complicated, something like the ratio of channel area to valley bottom width. You're still going to need a polygon for the channel in order to calculate that. So in our larger rivers, we still have lines that are representing actual areas. So to address that, we developed the channel area tool. I basically went into the NHD, and the NHD categorizes different water features. And in an iterative process, I pulled out these different water features and tried to figure out with a lot of refinement which combination of these features actually creates a geomorphically correct riverscape network. So again, this is what the NHD gives you in polylines, and then this is what our final channel area tool output is. So as you can see, it adds a lot of area. A lot of this, this isn't even just valley bottoms, to be clear. This is actual wetted area. This is just the channel area. So we now have a polygon network instead of a polyline network. So that was the channel area tool. Now I'm going to move on to segmentation, which has kind of been the bane of my existence the past couple months. When you are river styling an entire river network, you have to be able to break up that river network into different chunks so that you can actually apply those styles to the different chunks. And so I've run into a lot of issues with this, translating that goal into computer speak. So I pulled a couple local examples so that you guys might be familiar with them. On the left, we have Bear Lake, and we have one of the ways that we were segmenting our riverscapes. So as you can see, Bear Lake right now is actually segmented by all these tributaries coming in. And so we have about 38 segments in Bear Lake. We know that's not what we want. Bear Lake is one river style. It is not 38 river styles. And so here we have one valley bottom that is getting segmented way too much. Over here, we have the Bear River Wildlife Refuge, and we actually have one valley bottom, but we have upwards of 9 channels coming in. And so this is kind of the opposite issue. We have a place where we know that there's different river styles, and I can say that right off the bat because we've got ephemeral and perennial rivers coming in here, but we just have one valley bottom. So the issue here is that we have one valley bottom, but we want to be able to segment in a way that actually allows for multiple river styles to exist. So right now we have a tiered process, and essentially first we are breaking out the places that the NHD says this is a large enough river that it does have a channel area. So those are flow areas, and that's our first step. Then from there, in decreasing order of size and temporal permanence, we're breaking out different types of rivers according to the NHD still. That's going to give us pretty good segmentation, but we still have a lot of issues in headwaters. Headwaters are important because the river styles are usually changing as you lose elevation. And so we have the level path. I'm not going to get into exactly how that works. It's a lot of computer stuff. But once you segment using level path, we're doing a pretty good job with the headwaters and most of our areas. That's when we get to the level 4 ecoregions. Ecoregions are a combination of geology, climate, vegetation assemblages. So they actually give us a really good head start in predicting where we actually would be wanting to break those river styles. So our longer segments at that point are going to be broken up by the ecoregions. If for some reason we still have segments that are longer than 5 kilometers, we have a tiered segmentation by drainage area. It's usually just on the main stems. All right, so I walked you through 2 of the more technical pieces, and like I said, I will now talk about some field verification. So I have 18 test watersheds across the Mississippi. They represent the physiographic diversity of the Mississippi, and the goal is to visit as many of them as possible before the end of this project so that we can make sure that what we're doing on the desktop, looking at lines and writing code, is actually representing what is going on the ground. So last fall, Joe, my advisor, and I took a road trip from Logan all the way down to New Orleans, going through the southwestern part of the Mississippi. And we saw a vast array of riverscapes. And it was pretty cool. We had some preliminary model runs that we were testing, and so far everything's looking pretty good. But the main thing was just making sure that everything that we were doing makes sense in the actual landscapes that we are looking at. So we flew the drone a lot. And if you're following me on Instagram, you know that I kept kind of a public notes journal during this trip. And so a lot of this was looking at how urban riverscapes are responding to urbanization. We flew the drone to answer questions such as, is this active or inactive floodplain? We were looking at human impacts in agricultural lands. And I took a lot of pictures of fans because they're really cool. So that's basically the trip. Mostly this was just a slide to show you this cool drone footage. So to bring it all together, there are some things that I've done. There's still a lot more that I'm working on to get to those final products, which hopefully will look something like this, or at least communicate some of this information. And again, we are trying to provide this information for practitioners, for educators, because we are concerned with effective riverscape management. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to my lab et al, to the folks up in Canada that do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of computers and such. Brian Murphy helped a lot with the initial conceptualization, my emotional support dog, that is not my dog, and the Natural Resources Conservation Service who funded this project. Thank you. Yeah.
these as letters that I won't name, but it's, widely talked about and kind of communicated within practitioners. And I'm wondering, where this project kind of varies from using a Roswell classification, where you think it complements, differentiates, improves upon
Yeah.
that system.
It can definitely, it's not setting out to like replace, can definitely complement. The main difference between what I'm trying to do and Rosgen and other classification systems is that's mostly like field or desktop based for a specific area. You can't really do that in an efficient way for large scales. So this is just using nationally available data. It's not using field data to classify rivers.
More than like modeling exercise and classification.
Sure. Yeah. So you could have the output from my tool that says, hey, this is what you should expect in this area. And then you could go to that same area and apply the Rosgen classification system if that's more what you're interested in. And you could use both of those frameworks in your work. Yeah.
So if we back off of the production stuff and we think about research questions, you've already figured out the channel surface area
Yes.
of the second largest watershed on planet Earth.
Yes.
So one of the most fundamental questions in geomorphology is, why are streams as wide as they are? And how do they change in width downstream? And what controls it? And a gazillion things.
Mm-hmm.
And if all you did was take every little piece of every place in the second largest watershed in the world and divided it by the length,
Mm-hmm.
surface area divided by length is the width, is the average width.
Mm-hmm.
And you're sitting on a gold mine of data that you could write papers
Yeah.
from now forever on just that, because there's a gazillion people who have done studies of channel width all over, and you could see whether everything you've done passes a lab test. Because the one thing we don't know is whether any of your numbers are real or not,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you might think about, so you could make some fundamental contributions that have nothing to do with this production stuff for practitioners. You might think about what a gold mine you're sitting on.
Yeah, I'm really excited about, I kind of glossed over this, but all of this is going into a SQLite database. So, other researchers can query that to their heart's content. And so right now I'm focused on what the NRCS needs and meeting that objective. But a byproduct of this is going to be a database of all of those metrics. So yes, I am very excited about that.
Are you going to compare your numbers with this other stuff to see whether your numbers are right?
Not within the context of my master's. Yes. Okay.
Noel Hines was a grandfather, maybe great-grandfather of stream ecology, wrote a paper based on a classification proposed by wildlife scientists back in the 70s, and concluded that there were at least 180,000 kinds. And since then, we know that the classification is very based on spatial resolution, based on the attributes that we use. I'm still struggling a bit to understand what question, whether it's management or a basic science question, is going to answer with your classifications. So roughly how many kinds of river styles are there going to be? that classification going to be useful to ecologists, to landscape managers who are regional or local meetings and context?
Sure. So a couple different, I guess there's a couple different questions in that question. How this differs is that it's nationally available data. So it's probably coarser than, I'm assuming, the ecologically based classification. And so there's that. And then your second question was, who is this going to be relevant to? So this is definitely more of a geomorphic focus classification, but we know that geomorphology, dictates a lot of habitat and such. So I could see this being very useful to ecologists. Right now, a lot of the focus is on, like I said, NRCS professionals who are concerned with, various issues within the Mississippi, but, sedimentation, agricultural use, et cetera. But I guess ecologist is such a broad term that, yes, I could see all of those things also being of interest to ecologists. I think a research context, if you're not directly interested in the geomorphology of a reach, this is going to be such an easy tool to use that it would never hurt to just pull this up for context. So
I guess I asked the question mostly in the sense, if you can provide an example of a specific use that would very much help. I mean, you point out ecoregions are used by EPA, and they were developed for sort of a general purpose context, but in fact, they're practically useless for predicting what sort of stream might actually occur, for example. And so there was a lot of potential promise in their use, but little realization of that promise. So some sort of example would help convince people like me that this is going to be a really useful product.
I guess if, in terms of stream biota off the top of my head, if we river style, and I get to the point where I say, all right, this is a constricted steep headwater reach. Again, I'm not an ecologist, so I don't actually know what kind of stream biota are in those, but, I have a map of the, Huckate that you're working in, and it says there's, 18 kilometers across this Huckate that are this constricted, headwater reach. And then you have a student that goes out and samples the stream biota of that. You can then predict, they can only make it to 5 kilometers. You can predict that you're going to see the same stream biota in those different flavors across that basin. Again, this might be something that is redundant to other tools, studies, but if you're combining this, if you do that in one Huckate, and I also have mapped the entire Mississippi River Basin, you could make some predictions about stream biota across there. Again, I'm not an ecologist, so I don't know if I'm actually biologically correct there, but
We'll talk to you in a few years.
all right, sounds good. Thank you.
Just while we're